and YouTube and Twitch are good to go. All right, everyone, thanks for joining. My name's John, and this is Victor. And we're going to do some intros here, and you're going to get to preview, like, what does a mentorship call look like? So Laterally is a coding bootcamp alternative. So we're going to go through the process. When does it make sense to use Laterally? When does it not make sense to use Laterally? And then in the specific situation of Victor, I think it makes sense for him, and thanks to Victor for agreeing to do this. And so we'll go through some intros. You'll get to understand his kind of unique situation and why it makes sense in this case. So this advice is going to be tailored based on Victor's specific situation, but hopefully everyone can still take a good lesson away. If nothing else, one lesson is mentorship calls are customized to you. So that itself is an important lesson. And that's a difference compared to, right, a lot of the boot camps and a lot of the CS programs are kind of like one size fits all, and they're not really tailored to you individually. So we're going to go through some introductions. We're going to go into the normal mentorship call routine. And the first thing I do in these calls is I double check before we do any new learning, is there anything that's come up since our last call? So that's going to be one thing we go through. Another thing we're going to do is called the trial by fire. This is a standard procedure that I do. You can see another example of this on my YouTube channel, but we'll also do it here. And the point of this, why is it called the trial by fire? Because you're diving straight into the code. You get to the low level immediately. And the point of this is to double check foundational skills for HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So given Victor's background, he already knows how to code. But we still want to check fundamentals. Other people may have never coded before, and it's a really useful exercise because you can preview the big picture, if you will. You can see HTML, CSS, JavaScript all coming together and actually building something in your very first session. So it's a really cool exercise to check fundamentals and also communicate the bigger picture of what we're doing with web development. And then the last thing we'll do is just sort of review Victor's progress so far. So one of the elements of the Laterally program is that I make a customized curriculum for every individual. And so in Victor's case, I have recommended that we will build a portfolio site and a blog. And so the question is like, how much progress have you made? Do you need any help? And we'll do that at the end because that will help us create the agenda for next meeting, basically. Like the to be continued, the agenda items for next meeting. So with that, Victor, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello everyone, thank you for joining. My name is Victor. I studied computer science in Brooklyn College in 2019. And from then till now, I have yet to land my first role in tech. But mostly because of the things we endured, and then I decided to just take a break from it all. Now coming back into it, I noticed that I currently, don't stand out as a strong candidate, so that's why I reached out to John about my unique situation, how I'm coming back into tech, and what I'm missing, things I need, and I discovered John when I, was looking through Codecademy, free code camp. Do I need this? Do I need to put this on my resume? And then he had a great video which mentioned that how he prefers Codecademy, and how, for some people it is the right choice, and for some people they might have to go to like boot camp. And because of my special situation, I, decided to reach out to him because in the video he mentions that, he does this, and his consultations, he designs what's best for you. He tailors what you need, not just what everyone does, which I think was kind of what I needed. That's because I needed mentorship or guidance from someone already in the field, just to help me build my resume and take a look at the projects I've done, how to make them better, or like what should I do to grow. And yeah, here we are.
Awesome. Really great summary. So I'll just reiterate a couple things that you just said. One is that Victor does already have a CS degree, right?
Yes.
And he also already has a GitHub portfolio, and he has contributions. You can see, I'm showing it on the screen right now. You can see the contributions go back at least to March of 2021, and probably even earlier, but that's when the graph cuts off. Some of the contributions are a little bit sparse, but that's also okay. The point of this is to demonstrate that you have programming experience over time. It doesn't necessarily need to be like every day. But now I can talk to a recruiter and I can say I have at least, a year of experience coding. So that's another thing that's unique to Victor. Another one is the restaurant, right? So we didn't talk about this and we don't really need to get too deep into it. But after trying to get a degree, my understanding, Victor, is that you got the degree and you couldn't immediately get a full-time role as an engineer. So you ended up in the restaurant industry for a while.
Yes.
And I think that's actually a good thing. Other people that I've talked to, when they weren't able to immediately land an engineering role, it's kind of a stigma. It's kind of uncomfortable. But actually, I think it's a really great opportunity to develop in the restaurant industry. It would be like customer service skills, right? Communication skills, soft skills. These are things that employers really care about. And a lot of new college grads are CS grads in particular are actually quite low in these soft skills. So whether you are like a CS grad and you don't immediately land a role, or if you're not even a CS grad, right? You could have a completely different degree field or maybe not a degree at all. I would say definitely when it comes to interview time, be proud of your background and figure out ways to word it and to show that this is giving you transferable skills. Cool. So I think that's good for intros. Oh, well, let me say my side, right? So my name's John. I run Latterly, latterly.io, which is a coding bootcamp alternative and a mentorship program. So I do a free initial consult call with whoever's interested and try to give them some good advice. And the advice goes like this. Is a coding bootcamp a good idea for you? Is a college degree a good idea for you? Is self-learning a good idea for you? And is mentorship kind of an optimal path for you? So these are the options that I look at, and I rank them by the return on investment. So the best return on investment thing would just be you can teach yourself, right? If you're able to teach yourself in a short amount of time for low cost, that's a really great return on investment. Next would be coding boot camps. It's like, hey, I need some guidance. I need some structure. I can't really do it myself. I need someone to provide a structured curriculum and so forth. Coding boot camps are short in duration, right? Compared to the 4-year degree, it's like 4 years. Frankly, it's usually 5 years on average to graduate. Coding boot camp can be like 4 to 6 months, sometimes even less. But they do cost quite a chunk of change, and you also need to be careful that you pick the right one. So I have other videos that will tell you how to pick the right boot camp, so feel free to check those out or leave a comment if you'd like to learn more. I'm going to skim over that for now. But basically, and then another option is the degree, and then another option is mentorship. So when we looked at these options for Victor, first of all, he already has a degree, so I'm not going to send him back for another degree. Although I think maybe it's something to think about whether you should go for the master's, but I think that's probably not the optimal return on investment right now. The other thing would be self-teaching, and the answer is he's already doing that, but he's become aware of some blind spots, not so much with coding, more so with the job search. And so that's a great place where I can come in and supplement. So he largely is doing self-teaching, but I'm going to supplement in a few areas like the job search tips. 3, college degree, boot camp, yeah, just same thing as the master's degree. It's like you could do the coding boot camp, but you've already paid for a degree. It feels like unnecessarily high expenditure, basically. A lot of the value that a boot camp would give you is stuff you don't need, like the actual learning to code piece. You basically already know. So it seems like an inefficient way to spend your money, although, it's an option. And I think I mentioned to you that if we can't get you a job in 3 to 6 months, then I would consider it a boot camp at that point. Specifically a boot camp that has a placement guarantee. But I think we're going to be able to get there without that. Okay, so that was sort of the process of elimination, and then some of the things that I recommended for him specifically. You can see, I think I'm sharing it. Let me check my screen. Yeah, you can see on screen this github.com/vnestor. He has this cool looking readme.md at the top. That's called the GitHub Special Repository. So I'll show his repositories. He has one repository called vnestor. That is the special repository. So it's a repository that has the same name as the user account name. That's what makes it special. And if you create a README file over here, You can see this is the README file, and GitHub will hoist that. It'll bring it up to your profile and show that right up top. And then there's like some fun emojis, and what's really important is that you can quickly link over to his portfolio, and you can quickly link over to his LinkedIn. So it's really great that you've done that in the meantime. So I recommended he do that, and there was a kind of like low value GitHub repository that he had pinned. I said, let's unpin that and let's get you a portfolio site and a blog, two things that he didn't have at the time. So those were some of my quick tips. I also reviewed his resume, but the resume looked really good already. So, and then I also, this is the last thing we went through that I'll review, which is some basic job search tips. So one thing is like, don't apply to more than 2 jobs at the same company. Another is like make sure that you're applying to at least 50 roles per week. And then after you apply, follow up with a human. And this is going to increase your application response rate, is if you're actually following up with humans at the company that you just applied. There are 3 kinds of people that you want to talk to. One is a technical recruiter. You can just tell them something like, hey, I applied, can you check on the status of the application? That's kind of the technical recruiter scope. You can also ask the technical recruiter to put you in touch with a hiring manager, and then you can talk to the hiring manager, which is actually a better move, I think. When you talk to a hiring manager, you can ask them for like the business perspective, what projects are going on, and what does the performance review process look like? What does the sort of like interview process look like? Those are really great things you can do with a hiring manager. And the third kind of person at one of these companies that you would want to speak to is another engineer. And when you talk to the engineer, you can ask them something like, hey, I saw your company is using Docker, or your company is using Python, but what specifically are you doing with it? Do you mind grabbing coffee for like 15 minutes and do like a Zoom call and we can chat about it so I can know more specifically, technically what's going on? Engineers love to talk about that. Another thing you can do with the engineer is ask for a portfolio review. So send them your GitHub and say, hey, these are some of my sample projects. As an engineer at this company, does this look like kind of like what y'all are looking for, or what changes would you recommend? If they give you a green light, thumbs up, they say it looks good, you can ask them for a referral. If they recommend you make changes, please do make the changes. Then you can ask for a referral. Don't ask for the referral without making the changes. That's really rude, right? And then engineers typically don't like to do resume reviews, but hiring managers and technical recruiters will often give you a resume review too. And similarly, if they say, hey, make these changes on your resume, and if you do that, then maybe you can be so bold as to ask for a referral. So those are some of the job search interview tips, and then collect the roles that you've applied to and your social contact, collect those on a spreadsheet. On the spreadsheet, you should say where you are at in the interview process pipeline. Have you submitted the application? Have you gotten the initial response? Have you taken the phone screening, taken the first round, second round? Some companies have a third round, it sort of varies. And then did you ultimately get an offer? If so, what was the offer? You can track all that in a spreadsheet. And the big question is this, are you getting a good response rate? If you're getting a good response rate, then probably your portfolio and your resume are fine. If you're not getting a good response rate, might need to work on your resume, your portfolio, and social follow-up. If your response rate is good, but you're still not getting offers, then probably you want to practice actual interview skills. Those might be algorithm interviews, coding interviews, take-home projects. There's a variety of different kinds. Also behavioral interviews. So you kind of need to figure out like which one is actually the problem. But that's basically the diagnostic. If you want to get to the offer stage, the problem is going to be in 2 groups. Either you're not getting to your first interview, or you're getting to the first interview, but you're not getting to the second, third, and eventually an offer. So that's the high-level diagnostic. Okay, so I think that's a really good review of like how we got to this point. And then today what I'd like to focus, so let me first of all ask before we dive into today's lesson, hey Victor, is there anything that's come up in between last time we talked that we should like work on first?
I don't think so. So far, I've been just focusing on brushing up my portfolio and my blog. Haven't really looked at, any opportunities that opened up. So I think that might be what I might be doing next.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so we can push that, I think, to the end of today's discussion. We'll do today's lesson, and then we'll go over your blog and your portfolio to help prep for next time. Does that sound good?
Sounds great. Thank you.
Awesome, for sure. Okay, so let's do the trial by fire. So this is really fun, I think. I, yeah, we're going to go through quickly HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Are you on a Mac or a PC?
Yes, sorry, I was muted for a second.
Yeah, no worries. Are you on a Mac or a PC?
Yes, I am.
Are you joking? Are you on like a Windows machine or an Apple machine?
I'm on a Windows machine. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Like which one makes a difference actually? So if you're on Windows, we will use Notepad.
All right.
Um, are you comfortable sharing your screen, or should we open up Notepad on my screen?
No, I can open up Notepad on my screen.
Cool. Let me make sure that I have the sharing enabled. Cool. So yeah, whenever you open up Notepad, you should be able to share your screen.
Here we are. Okay.
No, I don't see it. Oh, I think it's starting to come through. Yeah, I can see it. Cool. So this is Untitled Notepad document. Perfect. Did you just create this on your desktop?
Right.
Awesome. So let's close it real quick. We're going to open it up in a minute, but first I want to rename it, and then I also want to show your extensions because it says Untitled, but I would like it to say untitled.txt.
TXT.
Yeah. So can you close the file real quick?
Yeah.
And then there are 3 places to check if we want to show the extensions. I'm trying to remember. We might have to Google it. One is you can right-click the file and go to Properties.
Like this.
But you might be able to do it here. No, I don't think the save screen. That is similar to the Windows Explorer screen, so that would be the second place to check. The folder icon. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah.
Save it on my desktop. All right. Let me see if I can bring this in.
I think this is right. Yeah, so if you go there, and then if you go to View, the View tab at the top. So this is the context menu. When you do a right click, this is called the context menu. So the context menu has View, but the Windows Explorer window itself, before you right click, that also has a different View tab at the top of the education folder window. Yeah, perfect. So sort of like in the middle right, there says File Name Extensions. Perfect. All right, so we checked that one. And now if you go to your like desktop, you see how it says like ttp.txt?
Yeah.
That's exactly what we want. So now, let's see, do you want to make a text file here, or basically cool. Basically that untitled notepad, we want that one to have a txt.
Did I spell that right?
Sure. Yeah, that works. So let's close the other untitled and then we can open this one. All right, so the very first thing that we want to do is just write hello world, plain text. You can save that. And do you have Chrome installed?
Yes, I do.
Awesome. So let's open up a new Chrome tab.
Let me do this here. One here on this side.
Cool. And the file, so you can close your latterly.txt, make sure we save it, and then you can close it. And then you can go to your File Explorer, the folder, and click and drag the file into Chrome and just drop it in Chrome. Cool. So it tried to open that text file in Chrome, and you see it says hello world. So this is a plain text file. The question here is, what is the difference between plain text and HTML? HTML is hypertext markup language. What makes it hypertext? It's like better than regular text, right? The difference is with that txt file, how would you get it to be italic or bold or change the font size or anything like that? All these customizations. We cannot do that in plain text. So that's why we have HTML. So let's go to the txt file, open it again, we'll make a change. type the left angle bracket. Do you know what that means?
Left angle.
Yeah, that would be a backslash. So left angle, it looks like a caret, like if you're doing math. Yeah, perfect. That's the left angle. Now let's do the backslash. Let's type the word strong. Cool. Now you can do a right angle. So what you've just written is called a closing tag. So a closing tag is half of the syntax required in HTML to define an element on the page. So hello world is an element on the page. We want to get it to be bold, so we're using this tag, which is called strong. Strong is an example of semantic HTML. Semantic HTML means that we call it what it is, basically. So another way of doing this would be to use just the letter B instead of the word strong. The letter B is problematic because it doesn't actually mean anything. You might have memorized that it represents the word bold, but there's two problems with that. First of all, a user that is unsighted, bold doesn't really mean anything to them. So we like the word strong instead. A screen reader, that's a piece of software that unsighted users and others use. The screen reader can read strong, and it knows to basically emphasize the words. And so that's a more useful approach instead of just using the letter B. The second thing wrong with the letter B is you have to memorize what it means. Where strong, it tells you what it is. So that's more useful. I'd also say the left angle slash and then the right angle, that's called syntax. So again, having a background in coding, you already know this. But basically, whenever we talk about syntax in programming, it's the actual characters that you're writing and the way you write them. So the thing that we're trying to do is create bold, emphasized text. The syntax is to use left angle bracket slash and so forth. Okay. Thank you for refreshing the page. We can see a couple problems here. The first problem is, while the file is a .txt, it's just taking our letters and it's just putting them there literally. That's not what we want. We want the browser to actually use that language, parse it, apply the style, and not render those characters. So at this point, we should close the file and rename it to .html. Awesome. Oh no, the world's ending, right? Awesome, you already know what to do. Perfect. Good deal. So the good news is the end tag is now hidden, which is good because we don't want it to be shown. You can also open it with Notepad still. Cool. The good news is the end tag is hidden. The bad news is it is not being styled. It doesn't look the way that we expect. So there's basically the reason is because our strong tag syntax is incorrect. I would actually say incomplete instead of incorrect. So we have a closing tag, but we also need an opening tag. So before the letter H, would you mind putting a left angle bracket? Awesome. You can type the word strong, all lowercase.
Can I make the right one lowercase as well?
Yes, please. Yes, please. Awesome. Save it, refresh the HTML page in the browser, and now you can see it's bold. And so this is what browsers do. Browsers like Chrome, they understand HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. They understand how to use this. This is technically a programming language. HTML is a specialty programming language. It's a markup language. It's not Turing complete, but it's a special kind of programming language. So this is actually a really small, basically trivial HTML program. Cool, so it says hello world, but we want to do some fancier stuff. So now let's talk about CSS. So CSS is a way that you can do bold and italics just like you just did, but you can also do a bunch of other stuff like turning the background of the page green or creating hover effects. So let's do a couple of those. Let's do two more things before we get into the CSS. Let's make a couple more HTML elements so that we have more things to play with, basically. This hello world, let's change it from strong to H1. Perfect. Now let's, yeah, you can refresh it, that's fine. So this should be bigger now. So H1 is the heading of the web page. There should only be one of these on any given web page. Yeah, it's like a chapter title kind of in a book, so it would make sense that it's bigger and so forth. What we're going to be trying to build here is a really basic blog, and this is going to lead into your later project where you build like a React blog, right? But we're doing it at a more low-level vanilla way right now. So to make a blog, let's add a section tag. Good, good. Open it and close it. Yep. Awesome. Inside the section tag, let's add an article tag.
This is an A, correct?
It's the whole word article, article. Yep. Cool. Inside of the article tag, we will have an H3. That will be the title of the article. It's kind of like a sub header for the whole page, but it's the header for the specific article. You can put some text there. You can say like article 1 or something like that. My first article. Awesome. And after the closing tag for the H3, let's add a P tag. So P stands for paragraph. So this will be the body of the first article. You can just put lorem ipsum if you want. Lorem ipsum is some commonly used boilerplate filler text. Cool, so that's article 1. Now let's just copy and paste that the entire content of the article so that we have 2 articles. Awesome. So let's get rid of, yeah, very good, article 2. Let's get rid of the first closing section tag.
First closing section?
Yep. Nope, just the closing tag.
Oh, right here?
Yeah. Cool, and let's get rid of the first, or the second opening section tag.
Second opening section tag.
Yep. Awesome. So both articles are within the same section, right? Cool. So this gives us some stuff that we can color now. Now let's add a style tag. So
right after the section?
let's do this before the H1. And it's a good question that you brought up. Why would we put the style tag at the top or at the bottom? If you put it at the bottom, the rest of the page will load before the CSS rules load. In this case, it doesn't make too much of a difference because the whole thing is going to load extremely fast. But if you had a big website, what you would see is you would see a flicker of unstyled content, a flash of unstyled content, because all the HTML would come first, and then the CSS that gives it shape and color would be loaded afterwards. So we actually don't want that. We want to have the style rules defined first, so as soon as the HTML comes in, it's already styled. Cool, so what I would like to do here is I would like to demonstrate 3 different kinds of CSS selectors. So whenever we did the HTML strong tag, we simply put the text inside of the HTML, and the browser knew where to apply that bold visual. If we do this right here, the browser is aware that you want to bold something, but it doesn't know what. So we need to tell it what we want to bold in a different syntax. And so there are a bunch of ways to do this. They're called CSS selectors, and we'll just deal with 3. The most basic selector is the tag selector. So the way that you do a tag selection is you simply type the tag name. So let's select the H1 tag.
So we just type in H1?
Yep, simply type the tag name. Perfect. So that is a CSS selector, but it's selecting it and it's not doing anything with it. So now that we have selected it, we would like to define the style rule, CSS style rule. So the syntax for this is that you do a space after your selector, and then you do a after your selector, not after the tag. Yep, and then you do a left brace. Perfect. So what do you want to do with this hello world? Would you like to make it a different color or bold or italic or change the size of it? You pick.
Let's make it red.
Let's make it red. Okay. So basically, if you're not sure which keyword to use, you can just Google it, but I'll go ahead and tell you, if you want to change the color of it, the keyword is color. Awesome. So we are telling CSS, I would like to change the color of this H1. And what value would we like to give that color? We use key value pairs. So you can use the colon. And then we will give it the red value. There's a bunch of ways to express color. One is called the hex code. One is RGBA. Another is HSL. In CSS, we also have some colors that you can just put the name literally and it will recognize them. And red is one of those. So you can just do in double quotes, let's type in double quotes, red. Awesome. And now do a right brace to close the rule. And let's save it and refresh the browser. Oh, did I get that wrong? Try with red, try taking away the double quotes. I might have been wrong about that. Cool. All right, cool. So we have given this a red heading. Let's change the H3 so that the H3 color is blue.
In the same line, or do we open up a new one?
Good question. So let's keep all of our style rules in the same style tag, but do feel free to add a new line. Just bring the closing style tag down a few lines, and you can add, yeah, perfect. So you can, exactly, awesome.
What color are we doing the H3 tag again?
Let's do blue. Cool. So we got the blue. So we've done tag selection. Another thing that we can do, there are two other things that we can do. One is ID selection and one is class selection. The best way to write CSS rules that are going to be reused, if they're going to be reused, we should treat them as a class. So let's say that I want H3 and paragraphs. I want them all to be blue. One way to do this would be after your H3, you can type a comma, space P. And save that and you can refresh the screen and see. This is you have basically given CSS two selectors, but you're using the same rule for both selectors. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They're just comma separated. So that's one way that you could do it. It would actually be cleaner to use a single class. So the way that we do this is we go to our HTML elements and we give them a class. So let's go to all of our H3 and let's go just to the first one in the HTML, and then I'll let you do all the others after we do just one example. So the first H3 opening tag, after the letter 3, let's put a space, and let's type the word class equals, double quote, let's say blue dash color, and double quote to end that. So go ahead and take that syntax pattern where you do the class blue color. Let's add it to both paragraphs and the other H3.
Get rid of this one?
Not yet, not yet. One more paragraph to go. Awesome. We can save that, and yep, the H3 comma P, we will replace it. We'll keep the color blue, but we'll replace the selector. And we will use the period blue dash color. Awesome. So the period is the class selector syntax. So H1 is a tag. It has no prefix. It's just H1. Blue color has a period prefix. And that's how the CSS parser knows that you are using a class to select. Let's change the color from blue to green just so that we can prove that we're actually changing something, right? Save it and refresh the HTML page. Awesome. So a few things to call out here. One is with the class on our HTML elements, this is called an attribute. So we learned the class selector syntax, but we also reviewed the HTML attribute syntax. You can give all kinds of attributes to HTML. In fact, and then we'll use one more attribute called ID. We'll use that momentarily. The last thing I want to mention is that the CSS class name that we wrote is called an atomic style. So there's a bunch of different ways to write CSS rules. If you simply call it, if it's a one rule style and you simply call it by the rule, for example, color green, then that is an atomic style. Atomic means like one rule. Okay. So let's do two things. One is we're calling this blue color, but now it's color green. So let's rename all of our blue color to color green. Awesome. Second thing is we will use the final attribute selector that we're going to use. That is the ID. So on the first article, let's give the first article an ID attribute and set the value to my-first-article.
Does that have to be in quotes?
Yes, please. Cool. And in our style tag, let's add one new rule, which is my first article will be bold. So how do you select by ID? The syntax is the pound or hash character. Good, good. Let's make it bold. So I'm going to pretend like I'm just not going to tell you how to do CSS for bold. So just quickly Google that. Let's see how you can Google this. Would you mind doing a new tab on the screen that's being shared?
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was looking at my last screen. So
no worries.
Okay, let's see now. I would do ID HTML.
So this is giving you the HTML tag.
Right here.
Yep, exactly.
So then on here I would say font weight.
You're doing awesome, dude. No worries. All right, let's check if it worked. Looks good. Okay, so that covers basics of CSS. And the key there, even senior developers don't have all these like color, font weight. We don't have all these memorized. You just need to Google it, and it seems like you're totally fine to Google things. Great. Now let's do JavaScript. So this will be the last thing that we do. Yeah, so we will add a script tag at the bottom of this HTML file. Awesome. So the script tag tells the browser, so your browser by default, this is an HTML file, so your browser by default is going to try to interpret everything as HTML. The CSS syntax is not HTML, so your browser needs to know to parse it as CSS. That's why we use the style tag. It says, hey, the content of this is not HTML, right? Same for the script tag. When your browser sees a script tag, it's telling the browser the content of this is going to be JavaScript. So even though we're writing in an HTML file, we're actually using 3 different languages. JavaScript is the only language that is a true Turing-complete programming language. HTML and CSS are specialty languages. JavaScript you can really use anywhere. We're going to use it on the front end, but you could use this server side and other places on your mobile phone, etc. So what I would like to do is make a little, I want to make 2 things. One is a form that lets us write a little article, and it'll add, so we'll have article 1, 2, and 3 whenever we click the submit button on our form. And then I would like another button that just deletes the most recent article. Does that sound good? Cool. All right, so a form is HTML. Even though we are going to make it work logically and become interactive using JavaScript, we actually need to create the form as HTML before we can associate it with any JavaScript. So in our section, we have the articles section. After the articles section, let's create a new section. That's correct. However, you're adding the form into the same section. Let's have 2 different sections. So,
you want another section.
yeah,
Sorry.
no worries.
Here.
Yep. Open form, close form. And we can just put the button that I talked about, we can just put that right after the form. So you can make, after the form, make one standalone button. Cool. For the button, let's go ahead and expand it. I like that you used the self-closing syntax, but we're going to want to give it a label. So let's open it and close it, and we'll have it say, let's label it properly. So it could say, remove last article. Awesome. Now that we have 2 sections, let's go ahead and label them. So the section 1, let's give it the ID, which is articles-section. And then the form, we'll call it form section. And you're doing a great job here. Your IDs and your classes are lowercase and they are dashed case or kebab case. That's really ideal. That's really optimal. If you think about my first article, the CSS selector, if there were spaces in that ID, that would create a CSS selector problem. Do you see that? Yeah, because in CSS, the space means something different. It doesn't actually put it all together as one word. Space, if I did, let's actually do that. Green color, let's make one more CSS rule. So my first article, the CSS line, let's copy and paste the whole line so it appears twice. Now, after the E in article, let's put a space, H3. And let's change the rule to say color orange. Awesome, save that. And you can go refresh the page. So the space, when you're using a CSS selector, the space means any H3, which is a child of my first article. So that's a really good reason that our IDs and our classes should not have spaces in them. So it's good that we're doing lowercase and kebab case, or using dashes instead of spaces. Great. Now we can build our form if we want to, but let's do the remove last article functionality. Let's do that first, because we actually don't need a whole form to do that. It's pretty straightforward. So let's give the button an ID, and you can call it anything you want. Okay, I said you can call it anything you want, but let's not call it that. So let's try to describe the button ID. Let's create a name like you're naming a recipe, like a food recipe. So call it by what it is or what it does instead of just giving it like a number. Perfect. Yeah. Now that we have given it an ID, we can connect it to our JavaScript. So in the JavaScript, you have an opening tag and a closing tag. Let's add about 3 line breaks between them. Cool. Gives us some space to work with. At the top, we will declare we will get the button right here. We're going to take it out of HTML and put it in JavaScript. So we're going to name a variable. Do you know how to create a variable in JavaScript? Cool.
And we're going to use the ID?
Yes. So let's type document dot get element by ID.
Okay.
Cool. You can do a left parenthesis, do a single quote. You'll put the ID right here. Single quote to close and parenthesis to close. And then I do put semicolons. They're optional, but I prefer them. Cool. So this is almost correct. When you said var, you used you used a keyword, but we need to give it a name. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I just went straight to var. Is it okay to have a move article twice, or would you stray away from that?
I'm totally fine with that. Actually, I really like that. Cool. I would be worried if it was both remove dash article, because then we have, whenever we search for the string, we have reference confusion. But because the syntax is different, one is camel case, one is kebab case, then we don't have that issue. And I actually quite like this because it helps the developer know, hey, these are actually the same thing. One is just the JavaScript representation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. 2 other tweaks I would make. One is var is the old JavaScript. In ES6 Plus, we like to use const or let. Do you know what the difference is?
No, I don't.
So const is for constants, something where the reference should not change. And let is for references that will be mutated. Right. So you're right that in this case we would use a constant because we're always talking about the same button, right? We don't want to like talk about different buttons. We just want the one remove article button. The other thing that I would tweak, and this is more just like a personal preference, this is not technically necessary, I would prefix remove article, I would prefix it with lowercase el. And then make the R capital, yeah. So this is an indication that this is an HTML element. So we have different types of variables in JavaScript. And so this is just a convenience approach that will tell the developer, hey, this variable is supposed to be an HTML element. Cool?
Yeah.
All right, so we have a reference to this button. What we want to do now is we want to do something when it gets clicked. So on the next line, let's type the variable name. And we're going to add an event listener. So whenever the user clicks or scrolls or interacts with the web page, what we call this in JavaScript, we call these events. So basically we want to capture an event listener. So would you mind going to Google and Google search add event listener to button, something like that. Or button on click. So the specific event that we care about here is the click event.
Add event listener element. So this is our element. And then use the click of my function.
Yep, so functions, we're going to define a function and you can give them any name you want. I don't want to call this my function. What do you think would be a good name for the function? It's going to be the function that removes the most recent article?
I want to say remove article, but I feel like we're using that a little too many times at this point. Maybe article deletes.
Let's just call it what it is. So I agree with you that remove article, we are using it too many times. More importantly, remove article is ambiguous. It's like which article. So we can solve both problems by giving it a longer, more specific function name. So let's call it remove most recent article. Awesome. Let's do it. Semicolon. Perfect. Okay, so what we have done now is we have bound a function called remove most recent article, and it's going to happen every time you click that button. The problem is our function doesn't exist. So we need to define this function.
Shows us right here how we could do that.
Yeah. Cool. What goes inside? We're going to change that. So let me just break down the function real quick. So just like our CSS rules, there's two parts. A CSS rule has a selector and then it has a rule body. In JavaScript, we have the function signature is what we call it. That includes the keyword function, the name of the function, and then the parentheses. If your function had arguments, they would go in the parentheses. Our function doesn't have any arguments, so it's empty. All of that constitutes the signature. And then we have the function body, which goes within the braces. Another interesting thing here compared to other languages is that JavaScript has hoisting, where we can declare the function at the bottom, but the processor will still read it at the top. And that's important because you can see we're actually using the function before we declare it, right? You see add event listener on right there. So we're actually using the function, but it doesn't exist yet. But we're allowed to do that because the JavaScript browser will, without you doing it, it'll automatically do it. It'll take that function and put it at the top above. Cool. One other thing. So let's also call out some of the problems with this code, and we're going to see that IDEs and React help us fix all this stuff. So one problem is that remove article.addEventListener, that's misspelled. So event has an extra E in it. Another one is that like the indentation of the whole HTML file is kind of cluttered. So section, article, H3P, it's all on one line, which makes it hard to read. In fact, we actually have to scroll left and right to even read the code, right? And that's totally fine. But this is just to call out when we leave Notepad and we use a proper IDE like VS Code, it's going to take care of all that stuff for us. So this is just helping us appreciate the value of a good IDE.
I'm going to start working on that?
No, please don't. Please don't. We shouldn't have to waste our time with that. The IDE should take care of it for us and make us more productive. The last thing I'll mention is, so we understand the value of HTML, CSS. We're working on JavaScript. We understand why IDEs are cool. At this point, I would also usually introduce Git and GitHub, but so that we get credit for the work we're doing, but you already know how those work, so I'll skip over that. And the other thing is I'll start to introduce the idea of React now. So what we have used, document.getElementById. This is called the document API. So anytime we use document dot, and there are a bunch of functions that exist on the document object, those are called built-in methods or built-in functions, and they are built into the document API. The document API is really powerful, but it's also really verbose to use. We're gonna notice as we do this, I have to keep saying document this, document that. In React, there's a streamlined syntax for the document API. We use something called JSX. Have you seen JSX before?
I have.
Okay, cool. So yeah, because you did like a React Create React app, right?
Yeah.
So basically JSX, what it's doing is it's replacing the document API. And that saves us a lot of time. Okay, cool. So yeah, we fixed the add event listener. the last thing I want to mention here is the console and also incremental functional development. So one thing we could do is we could write a bunch of JavaScript to do the whole thing we want it to do. The bad news is we get to the end, it might not work. And then the question becomes, hey, this doesn't work, like where's the problem? And you have to go all the way back to the beginning and do one step at a time to figure out where the problem came from. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So instead of doing that, what I recommend is we do console.log and we use the JavaScript console. Make one little change, check that it works as expected. One little change, check that it works as expected. So we actually never get to the end without catching the bug. We'll catch the bug earlier and we'll be able to fix it quicker. So before we actually try to remove the most recent article, that's what we want to eventually do. But for now, let's just console.log something like hello world or testing or I got here inside of the function. Cool. Go over here, refresh this. Okay, perfect. I was about to ask if you've used the console, but you're already ahead of me. I love it. So yeah, so there's hello world. Now let's take the console statement and move it into the function body. And so how do you expect that we can get it to say hello world now?
We have to call the function.
Yep. Cool. So let's refresh the page. Hello world should get wiped out. And let's try and make hello world appear.
Click element listener. So now we call the const remove article, right?
So all we should have to do is click the button on the web page now.
Oh yeah.
Bam, see? So what we wanted to test there is we just wanted to verify that the function binding is working correctly. So we said add event listener, like in theory everything should be good, but we didn't realize earlier that it was misspelled, right? So that's why we make one little change, test it, one little change, test it. And you would have noticed that really quickly if you were following this approach. If you took the other approach where you write the whole function, you'll get to the end, it doesn't work, and you have no idea why. Cool. So now within the function body for remove most recent article, we need to get a reference to the most recent article. So let's declare a variable inside of the function. This is called a local variable because it only exists inside of the function. And what should we call this variable? What do you think?
I would say let remove most recent article, remove article. I think that would be appropriate.
That's pretty good. Let me give two suggestions. One is this should still be a constant because we're referring to a single article. Every time the function runs, the variable will refer to a different article. That's true. But we still want to use const because during the time that the function runs, it's just one article in that time. Does it make sense? Cool. And the second thing is whenever we talk about variables, let's try to use nouns. So a function name can be a verb. That's really good. But a variable name, let's try to use a noun. So I think you said remove article. Let's try to get something that's similar, but it's a noun.
I would just say article.
Okay, that works. That works. So equals, and then we're going to do document.getElement, but this time we cannot do getElement by ID, right? Because the articles, we are going to create new ones. So there are two other things that we could do, and they're basically the same CSS selectors. So we can go by ID or by class or by tag name. Do you have any preference among those?
For this one, I would say, you said not to use ID, right?
Not to use ID, because when I add article 3, what's the ID?
Article 3.
Okay, so you're going to, whenever you create the new article, you will add a new ID? Is that your idea?
No, I'm just saying, like, that's why we wouldn't want to do that. So then I would suggest saying, collection. So then, wait, no, sorry. So what were the other options? My apologies.
Just, hey, no worries, man. Just like the CSS selectors, we see the ID selector, the class selector, and the tag selector. So we can get the element using any of those selectors, ID, class, or tag.
Then I would say tag.
Cool. So I think this is right. You can double check by Google, or we can just try it and then check if it doesn't work. I think it's called get element by tag name. Elements with an S. Sorry about that. Get elements by tag name. Cool. Parenthesis, and then in lowercase, let's pass the tag name. So we don't want just the H3. In the case of article 2, if we delete only the H3, it still says lorem ipsum. So let's actually get the entire article tag because it is the parent of both, right?
Yeah.
Cool. And a semicolon. So article on the right-hand side should be wrapped in single quotes because that is a literal string as opposed to a variable. Awesome. So let's just go with this for now. One little change, test it, right? So let's console.log. Let's change it from hello world and let's put the article there. In this case, let's not use the single quotes because we do want to log the article variable, not the literal string article. Does that make sense? Cool.
And go ahead and click, right?
Yes, please. All right, so you can see it says HTML collection and hover on those. There's 0 and 1. You don't need to expand them. There's a bunch of stuff on, there's a bunch of stuff on there. Just hover over the value. Yeah. You see the dev tools. What we're doing here in the console is called the Chrome dev tools. When we hover over the element, the dev tools highlight the actual element. Okay, good. So the good news is that we are getting all of the articles. The bad news is I just want the last one. I don't want all of them. So do you know how to get the last one? Okay, let's do 2 steps. First of all, let's change our variable name from article to articles because we want to be accurate, basically. Cool. Now let's make a new variable that is just last article.
Getting everything again here.
No.
Copy paste.
Nope. So 2 things. One, you misspelled the word last.
Oh, sorry.
Cool. And second, let's go to Google. And I'll give you this hint. You want to get JavaScript get last element in an array. So articles is an array. That's the hint I'll give you. You can do that, sure. It's not actually necessary though. So once we have the articles, we just need to get the last element out of the array, regardless of how we came to obtain that array.
People have to say local array length -1. So I would say we can get our array, the length on array -1 because we start at 0.
Nice. Yep.
And we do that.
That's it.
And our array name would be HTML collection.
HTML collection is the variable type. It's not the variable name. The variable name is just articles.
Oh, okay. Oh, no, no, actually, left point that out. So articles right now is in array.
That's right.
All right, just clearing that up. So then I would say const left article, then articles our dot length -1, right?
That will give you the last article index, but it won't give you the last article object. So do you see in Aaron's answer on Stack Overflow? There's loc underscore array dot length -1. So you're getting that index, but we need to use, so that's going to be a number. That's not going to be an element. We need to use that number to look up the actual object from the array. Awesome. Yep. So that bracket syntax, and you can add a semicolon. So that bracket syntax is the way that you can use an index to look up a particular value from a list or array. So now we have the last article. And you can do the test case if you want for however many articles exist, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you will always be getting the last one. So let's see if we can log the last article now.
Article it's not defined right because it's not article, it's articles. There we go.
You can see you just hover over it, and you see even on the console it's logging an HTML tag. You see that?
Yes.
Art.
Articles. Yep.
Yep. All right, so the very last thing we need to do, last article, we need to remove it. So you can double check how to do that with Google. And let's go ahead and get rid of those console logs. We don't need them anymore. So the only thing left to do is remove that last article. We already have the element. We just need to delete it now. Cool. Another way that you can do this, and that's totally fine. Go ahead and search. You'll probably find the answer. Another way that you could phrase this is how to remove an element from the DOM, D-O-M. So whenever we use document dot, we are using the document API, and we are following the document object model. And the abbreviation for document object model is DOM, D-O-M. Yeah, but I think your search was also fine.
So then, using the JavaScript remove and remove child message to element from HTML document. And I want to see an example of how they use it. Remove child. Div.parent node remove child div. I guess the answer would be this.
That is one approach, yes. If you follow that approach, you don't just get the article reference, you also need to get the article parent reference. But you can totally do that if you want. There is another way that you don't need to do that.
Div.remove. So then that would be article remove.
Let's try it. Guess and check is a big skill. Don't be afraid to guess and check.
That is my guess. And I'm gonna refresh. Yeah.
All right, my friend. We got it. So the rest of it's going to be homework. The form will do that for homework. I'll quickly help you build the HTML form, but I'm not going to help you do the JavaScript. That's homework. Sound good?
Sure.
So the HTML form, you have the outer tag. That's correct. Whenever you get to the JavaScript, you are going to need to give it an ID. Eventually, later, you can do that. We also want to give it 2 inputs. So one will be an input element. We can open a tag. It's a self-closing tag, and the tag name is literally input. Cool. And the second is an abstract input. We use it like an input, but it has a different tag name. It's kind of special. And that is also a self-closing tag. It's called text area, all lowercase, all one word. Cool. And that can be self-closing. Perfect. And you'll need to give those IDs also. And the idea is that the input will be the article title, and the text area will be the article body or the article paragraph. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. You will also want to have inside of the form one more button. Let's do it after the text area. And this will have type submit.
Type submit.
Yeah, the type attribute. It's an HTML attribute.
Here?
Yep.
So what does it be type?
Yep. Equals double quote submit. And so this, anytime you have a button that has a submit type and it's inside of a form, what's going to happen is that it will submit the whole form, which is what we want to do. Add article. Is there a space before the A? I can't tell.
Here?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, good.
No.
Perfect.
One word.
And then the button closing tag, the slash is on the wrong side of the keyword.
Oh, yes. Because that was my self-closing. It's the other one.
Good deal. Looks good to me. So you can save it. Yeah, and then next time we meet, we will review your portfolio and your blog. You'll be doing a React blog, is that right? Oh, what happened there? The text area. Oh, try moving the slash on the text area to the front. Hold on. Yeah, the text area is wrong for some reason. Maybe it needs to be not self-closing. I forget what goes in the middle. You can Google that. It might be like if your browser doesn't support it, it displays a message. Yeah, I think inside it, you can double check on Google, but I think it should say in the middle, it should say something like, oh no, I think it's the preview text. So put in the middle real quick, let's say enter article body here. Yeah, and then it's sort of the preview text, right? Okay, great. That makes sense. Cool. So yeah, so make that add article piece work. That's your homework. And then we will work on the proper React blog next time. And the big lesson learned here, I think you demonstrated really good communication skill and I would say moderate familiarity with HTML, CSS, and vanilla JavaScript fundamentals. And that's okay. That's good enough that we can move forward. I think we realize that like typing in Notepad is like really annoying. And so next time we'll do VS Code and I'll go through all of the right plugins with you. You may already have them installed, but things like auto formatting with Prettier. Have you used Prettier before?
I have.
Perfect. I love it so much, right? It makes everything so easy.
Yeah, it does.
So yeah, and then that's kind of like the big lesson here is some of this you already knew, but just for the audience, the fundamentals, and then also it's called the trial by fire because it can definitely be annoying and painful to do this in Notepad and to do this the vanilla way. But what comes next is the beautiful, very nice and easy VS Code, Prettier, and we're using React instead of the document API directly. So all of that's in the future. Any final like wrap up notes from you?
No, I noticed it's been a while since I worked with just vanilla HTML, and I realized I have taken other stuff for granted. But yeah, I appreciate you showing this to me. Like, it is annoying, but it's annoying for a reason.
Yep.
But yeah, appreciate that. Thank you.